Hey guys, so I'm afraid I've got some somewhat concerning news regarding the Chromium browser, the open source browser which is bundled on hundreds of Linux distributions, which is the open source variant to Google Chrome. So the concerning news is that it may not be as free and open source as we originally thought. There's been this story that's been unraveling over the past couple of days, and I apologize in advance if I get any of the technical details wrong, but what I will do is I'll put the sources in the description below, or the links to the sources in the description below rather, so that you can go and verify and check this out for yourself. I also apologize in advance if I do get any of the technical details wrong. So basically, someone discovered a couple of days ago that on the installation and first running of the Chromium browser, that it stealth downloaded and installed without any knowledge to the end user a proprietary module which had access to the system's microphone. So as you can imagine, this has concerned a lot of people in a lot of ways. Now, the likelihood is that this module is for the OK Google functionality, which is the voice recognition that Google uses, and it's very common on the Android. It's available on the Google Chrome browser. I don't even actually know if it's already available on the Chromium browser or not, but regardless, it requires the installation, or at least now requires the installation of this proprietary module, which a lot of people don't want. A lot of people do not like to necessarily have proprietary software on their machine, and certainly a lot of people don't want proprietary software installed on their machine without their knowledge or without their concern. And this does seem to be explicitly done so that the end user, even if they're somewhat technically advanced, don't know this, and this has broken trust with a lot of people, as you can imagine. And I got to admit, I'm one of those people. I do run some proprietary software on my Linux machine. I mean, I run games which are, many of which are proprietary, most of which are proprietary, and I do run a lot of sort of Office utilities which I've paid for. They are sort of paid for products, and they're proprietary as well. And by and large, if I trust the company or the video game developer to a degree, then I don't necessarily mind that their proprietary software is installed on my machine, especially if I've paid for it, because they don't then have that incentive to put spyware on my machine, which is pretty straightforward. But when companies are giving out free software that isn't open source, you've really got to question why, or what's in it for them, at least. And sometimes there are legitimate reasons. Sometimes they're growing their brand. Sometimes they're actually just solving a problem. Sometimes it's the trial version of another piece of software or whatever. And sometimes it's to put spyware on your machine. And there are more than a few companies that do that. So it's always worth at least questioning or doing a bit of research when you do get a bit of free software, fiscally free software that isn't open source, just to understand where that company makes its money, because it may very well get its money from exploiting your information. That aside, even though the OK Google is probably not going to be, and I'm certainly not defending this decision, I'd like to point out, but even though the OK Google module is unlikely to be sort of the nightmare that we're sort of all dreading, it's still installing proprietary software on your machine without your permission, and it does have access to the microphone as well. So depending on whether or not you're wearing a tinfoil hat, this might concern you in different ways. But it's certainly, as far as I'm concerned, and from my personal point of view, it's broken a contract of trust. It's this idea that that you install this piece of software, with the express intent or express expectation that it's going to be doing this in a certain way according to this certain software license, and then it does break that contract. There is no end user license agreement to read over. There is you don't necessarily get an obvious choice in it as well, although I know that some people are going to try and or I assume that some people are going to try and recompile or sort of edit out that module in sort of Libre Linux distributions. I'd be surprised if they didn't, and I'd certainly be very surprised if they let that stand, but I wouldn't be surprised if some Linux distributions at that point just didn't bundle the Chromium browser because of this. So this leaves a lot of people, as it currently stands, pretty annoyed, because it might not even necessarily be a contract of trust that's broken, because with the idea with open source is that you don't trust the software. The idea is that the software is transparent, so that you can rake over the code and see for yourself how on the up and up it is. And to the whole situation's credit, it's because Chromium is open source that we actually managed to identify this problem in the way that we have. And I think that this is actually an example of the open source community working, because someone's tried to pull a crafty one on us, and people have spotted it. And to be honest, we owe those people a great debt of gratitude. So thank you. But where do we go from here now? And I certainly feel that just because they've done that bait and switch, that there is a betrayal of trust there, and maybe it's worth going back to Firefox. Now, I know that Firefox really is, perhaps, well, at least in my personal opinion, not as good a browser as Chromium. It runs in a single instance, which means if you have one tab that crashes your browser, all of your tabs go down. Whereas with Chromium, each of the tabs is sandboxed as well. Firefox does not run a 64-bit mode. I think it's pretty much an exclusively a 32-bit mode. Although if you run on Windows, there are sort of versions of Firefox, or there are people have taken Firefox and they've made 64-bit versions. I think CyberFox is one, but I could be wrong on the name of that one. So there are certainly avenues to go to with Firefox, but I gotta say, that is something that I really did not expect from Google. Now, Google is certainly a mixed bag when it comes to not only supporting Linux, but also supporting the open source community. They were the ones that took, when they bought out Android, they actually did decide to open source it, to their credit. And they did decide to open source the Chrome browser, and thus we have Chromium in the first place, so there is that. But then they pull this bait and switch, which is a big problem. That is something that the idea of open source software, and the idea of the open source community, and one of the core values of the open source community is software autonomy. The idea that we have control over our software, and that we should be able to opt in to these kind of things. And the fact of the matter is, there was no opting in to this OK Google proprietary module that's going to be downloaded and installed as part of Chromium. It was done very much under the radar, in the expectation and the hope that people basically wouldn't latch on, wouldn't see it, and that's broken our trust, or at least it's broken the trust of some people. Now, Chromium is a very good browser, and I'm certainly going to be keeping my ear to the ground to the situation, and I'll probably update you guys as well through videos as well, as to whether or not we're going to expect an apology out of it, or expect some kind of rectification or resolution out of it, and I don't really know where the situation is going to go from here. But like I say, I'm not like an open source zealot. I'm not, there is proprietary software on my PC, but it's generally stuff that I've paid for from a company that I trust, or at least understand its motives. So with that in mind, I don't know, maybe it's worth firing up Firefox again and seeing whether or not any of the newer versions have improved. I know that they've implemented a few things, a few new things. I'd be quite interested to see whether or not is it Firefox Hello is actually any good. But when it comes to video chat, Jitsi is actually really good, that I found. Anyway, that aside, let me know what you think down in the comment section below, and also if I have made any mistakes, or what are your thoughts on the idea of it all. Please let me know again in the comment section below, because this is very much a topic where discussion can really help us, where it can help us inform each other, and also help us sort of work through whether or not we want to switch out from Chrome and bring in Firefox as well. It's certainly something that I'm considering, and let me know sort of what your choice of browser is as well, and why that is. Do you use Firefox all along because Google have pulled stuff like this before? But although, by all admission, this is probably the most shiftiest manner in which they've ever done it. I don't know. I'm still working through it myself. I'm still thinking it out. But like I say, sources in the description. Let me know what you think. And until next time, I've been Chris Ware, and you've been awesome. Take care now.